And for more, Vivek Ramaswamy joins us now. It was a fun time. Thanks so much for your time joining us tonight. Enjoyed talking with you earlier this summer in Ohio. So the second debate is next week. And since you exploded onto the scene in that first debate, you've grown in name recognition, but your polling still has you hovering in the single digits nationally. Anything that you're aiming to do differently next week in order to try to help boost your support?
Yeah, single digits or barely double digits would be fair. Latest Fox News poll at me at 11%, and we have a long way to go. You're right about that. I think I'm going to continue to do what got us here. Started at 0.0% in March, now polling at third, sometimes second in the national polling. And my goal is to speak the truth at every step, to speak our hard convictions in a way that hopefully unites all Americans. Not talking about Republicans and Democrats. It's a little bit different from me and the other candidates. I'd rather not talk a lot about Joe Biden or whoever it is that the Democrats are going to put up. I'd rather talk about what we actually stand for. We've got to run to something. Excellence, meritocracy, the pursuit of free speech and open debate, the rule of law in this country. That's what it means to be American. That's what we need to revive. I also think that's what people are hungry for in this country. But either way, that's my message. And if that's what people in this country want to see in their next president, then we will be ready to serve, and I expect we will be successful.
Young voters across party lines list climate as a top issue. You've said the, quote, climate change agenda is a hoax. I'd like to re-ask a question that a young Republican asked at the last debate that remained unanswered. Alexander Diaz said, how will you, as both president of the United States and leader of the Republican Party, calm fears that the Republican Party does not care about climate change?
Well, the fact of the matter is I do think that the climate change policies we have adopted in this country have been more harmful and led to more deaths, both in the United States and worldwide, than climate change itself. It is a hard fact, Linsey, that there's a 98% reduction in the climate disaster-related death rate over the last century because of more, not less, use of fossil fuels. 8 times as many people still die today of cold temperatures rather than warm ones. The right answer to all temperature-related deaths is more plentiful and abundant access to fossil fuels. The reason I called the climate change agenda a hoax is actually that it has very little, if anything, to do with climate change at all. And the way I can prove that to you is that the same people who oppose carbon emissions in the United States are perfectly fine shifting those same carbon emissions to places like China, where methane leakage, and methane's even worse for global warming than carbon dioxide, where methane leakage is worse in places like China. The same people who are opposed to fossil fuels are also opposed to nuclear energy, the greatest form of carbon-free energy production known to man, which I support, which would also be my answer to that question. I'm the strongest and fiercest advocate for nuclear energy in either political party. But the reason I call the agenda a hoax is I think it's more about global equity, letting China catch up, using multinational institutions to allow China to catch up.
But let me just ask you this.
It is about the climate itself.
Let me ask you this really quickly. We understand how you feel about the climate change agenda, but what about climate change itself? Do you believe in climate change?
Well, I think that, with due respect, I've talked about this in other forums, do you believe in climate change is not really a meaningful question because climate change has existed as long as the Earth has existed. Do I believe it is a fact that global surface temperatures are rising over the course of the last century and the last half century? Yes, I think that that is an established
and as president,
trend.
Would you do anything to try to buck that trend?
No is the answer. The thing I'm going to do is actually drive human adaptation and mastery of changes in the climate through technological advances. I think that requires more, not less use of fossil fuels, more, not less use of nuclear energy, finding ways of adapting to changing circumstances as human beings always have. That's how we advance human flourishing, human prosperity. That's the real metric that matters, not the amount of carbon we put into the atmosphere. And so, yes, I do care about human health, about human flourishing, about human prosperity. That's what I'm going to actually pledge to advance and lead. There are many risks. Climate is only one of them. There are many risks to human prosperity. And I think we need to focus more on, even in our environmental agenda, more on clean air and clean water and other basic attributes of making sure that human beings live healthy, meaningful, prosperous lives than just bending the knee to this one theory back in the 1970s said was going to lead to a global ice age, now says it's going to lead to global overheating. I think the reality is we need to focus on human prosperity. That's how I'll lead as commander-in-chief.
On the trail in Iowa, you recently questioned whether white supremacy exists in this country. Let's take a listen.
I'm sure the boogeyman white supremacist exists somewhere in America. I've just never met him. Never seen one. Never met one in my life, right? Maybe I'll meet a unicorn sooner. And maybe those exist too.
So help me to understand what you're implying or saying here. Are you really trying to say that white supremacists don't exist?
I've written 2 full books, one of which is an entire book detailed to race relations and victimhood in the United States of America. And where I've been clear is, of course, racism exists, but I do not think it is a top 50 problem in the United States of America. There was a point in our national history where we demanded a comprehensive response to racial inequality in this country. But Linsey, that moment has now long passed. And I think that once you get to a sufficiently low level of ill will or animus that one person has towards another on the basis of their skin color, then I think the right answer is to let that atrophy to irrelevance, not to adopt more race-conscious policies, because that fuels racism. And I do believe that many of those so-called anti-racist policies, like affirmative action and racial quota systems, are actually driving a lot of the anti-black racism and anti-Hispanic racism that we see in our country.
But I just want to get back to your point, because you did bring up,
yes.
you brought up your books. In your book last year, Nation of Victims, you called what happened in Charlottesville in 2017 a white supremacist protest. I mean, I could list a long litany of Dylan Roof in Charleston, Nicholas Cruz in Parkland, Robert Gregory Bowers in Pittsburgh, Patrick Wood Crucius. I could continue to go on and on of people who are self-identified white supremacists who killed a number of black and brown people in recent years. So I'm just curious about your idea of saying that we're beyond that point of needing action and that it's not really in the top 50 of concerns.
Yeah, I mean, and just as you see it in all directions, you have more black men killing black men than you do have white men or white cops killing black men. You have what happened in Waukesha, which was unconscionable as well. So I want to end all of this violence. But the part of the problem is we're fostering more animus. There's no better way to create racism and racial animus than to take something away of value from someone based on their skin color. That's the real greatest form of systemic racism that we have. Institutional racism, literally, in the United States of America, are institutions that allocate public goods on the basis of race and skin color. And I think that's not only bad for Asian Americans and white Americans, it is bad for black Americans and Hispanic Americans too. I think the right way to stop discrimination on the basis of race is to stop discriminating on the basis of race, to borrow from John Roberts. That has to be the path forward. I share the view of reviving colorblind meritocracy.
Okay, let me just ask really quick.
Let
me just ask
we need in the United States.
Really quickly, just a yes or no. So, do you think that white supremacy is a problem in the United States? Just yes or no.
It is not a top 50 problem, but does it exist? Yes, it does.
Your campaign has gotten the attention, of course, of former President Trump. He says he'd consider you for his VP if he's the nominee. Obviously, you're looking for the top spot, but just shy of that. How would you respond if he made you that offer?
Look, I think that the right role for me to play is be the next president of the United States of America. That's the only way I'm going to be able to unite this country to the fullest extent. And the role I'd like to have President Trump play, and the offer I'd make to him, is to be my mentor and advisor, especially in that first year in office. This isn't about ego. I will take advice, and I think that he has a lot of experience trying to take on the administrative state, actually highlighting China as a problem. I don't want to reinvent those lessons from scratch, but I think the right role for each of us is I'll take him as my mentor and advisor. I expect to serve as the next president. And I think that's going to be the way I'm going to be able to unite this country. And by uniting this country, that's what allows us to take the America First agenda to the next level.
But you
no,
wouldn't rule it out. You wouldn't rule it out if he were to call you.
I've said it in multiple forums that I would not take that job.
Okay. And lastly, I do want to just ask you, because you've said that Juneteenth is a useless holiday, but then you posted a video saying Happy Juneteenth and celebrating the holiday. I'm just curious how you get to have it both ways.
Well, look, I believe in finding the positives wherever they exist. I think that it has turned into a holiday of self-flogging. So the video that I posted was to say that let's not make this a holiday so long as we have it. Let's not make it a holiday of self-flogging. Let it at least celebrate. I'd like to redefine and reorient it towards actually standing for American ideals that we aspire to. But at our best, we don't create national holidays with a progressive gun to our head. I don't think that makes for good national holidays. I don't think it makes for good history. I think a better holiday that we need in this country is Election Day as a national holiday, so that people can actually vote on Election Day, make that a civic ritual in this country that literally has a use. Literally, the use is allowing people to vote on Election Day. And Juneteenth does not have a use in that same way. So I stand by what I said, but I am also an optimist for this country where so long as we're going to have days that we take off of work, I'd at least like to find the positives in them, even though I would have done it differently.
Always appreciate the academic debate and discussion. Vivek Ramaswamy, appreciate your time tonight.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.